Good evening. Continue on to look at the social needs and crime in Otara. As part of this project, the Community Justice Model for Otara, Therapeutic Jurisprudence and Action, the Case for Community Courts in Otara. This is Chapter 3 of my research proposal, and I am Karen Harding, lawyer from Auckland, New Zealand. Social needs of Otara and crime. A. Social issues in Manukau. This part of the paper addresses the effects of the justice system on crime and the social factors in the Otara community. It considers that the Otara community wants and needs to move forward as a safe and healthy community. It then goes on to propose in the following chapters just how justice delivery systems could be developed to better meet the needs of Otara, aiming to reduce crime and recidivism and seeking to increase community engagement with the justice system and enhanced public satisfaction with the courts, the legal profession and service providers. To start with, I'm just going to go through and do a snapshot of the issues in Manukau. 1/3 of the New Zealand population resides in the Auckland region, which is the commercial and crime hub of New Zealand. Manukau is growing to become the second largest area in the Auckland region and is geographically divided into a number of communities. There is serious crime and social deprivation issues in Manukau affecting this population, which negatively impacts on the health and well-being of its residents. These negative impacts flow on into the greater New Zealand economy and onto justice, corrections and health budgets, ultimately affecting all New Zealand taxpayers. Subsection 2. Issues facing Maori in Manukau. Manukau has a long Maori cultural history. Tainui is recognised as the tangata whenua. European settlers arrived in the 1840s and land wars followed in the 1860s. The subsequent land confiscations damaged the Maori and European relationship. The effects of colonisation and confiscations have had an ongoing negative social consequence over many generations of Maori in Manukau, and it's reflected in the statistics. These sadly show that great damage has been caused to our tangata whenua, as seen in the lower educational achievements, higher unemployment rates, high rates of criminal offending and incarceration, particularly of young Maori men, and high levels of social deprivation. Subchapter 3. A brown underclass developing in New Zealand. New Zealand is developing, quotation marks, a brown social underclass, close quote. That's from a report from a New Zealand child poverty problem. Around 270,000 children, when I was writing my paper back in 2011, are living in poverty, and more than half of those children are Maori or Pacific Islander. Child poverty is estimated to cost New Zealand $6 billion a year, and child poverty is worse in households that are on benefits. It is estimated that 1/4 of Maori need government help. Many of these children and families reside in Otara. Poverty has serious implications for the health, education and prospects in life, and impacts on government spending down the line for justice with increased health and welfare costs. It also has severe economic costs for the country as well. New Zealand has been rated 24th out of 25 rated OECD countries in child well-being. That means we're not doing very good. We're one up from the bottom. Subchapter 4. Population issues in Manukau. Since 1912, Manukau has experienced rapid population growth, accumulating a population in excess of 500-800 people in 2011. It is a multicultural environment embracing a diverse population of people with at least 165 different cultural groups within the area. According to the 2006 census, the Maori population here is the largest of any district in New Zealand. Maori predominantly reside in the poorer socio-economic areas. 18% reside in Otara. The second most commonly spoken language after English is Samoan. Maori unemployment is 12.5% higher here in the Manukau area than in other districts. Of those employed, the most common occupations are machinery operating, driving and labouring jobs. 45.7% have no formal qualifications that reside in Manukau. The median income is $24,000, which is lower than the rest of New Zealand. 44% of Maori have an income lower than $20,000 a year. Manukau is rated the highest on the Social Deprivation Index and has the largest number of two-family households in New Zealand. It's a youthful population, with 41% under the age of 24 years. Contrary to decreasing fertility rates throughout New Zealand, birth rates here in Manukau are increasing, particularly among Maori and Pacific Islanders, with an emphasis on teenage pregnancies. In Otara, young people make up 20% of the population. The population growth in Manukau area is rapidly increasing at around 12,000 or so residents per year, inflicting an increased burden on social services and justice. Subsection Chapter B, Otara, Issues for the Future. A crime prevention project in Otara identified the fact that residents were very concerned with school truancy, petty criminal offending in the area, graffiti, vandalism, teen pregnancies, increased drug and alcohol use, violence, youth suicide and gangs. These issues and health problems impact negatively on the community. A report in 2011 from the Otara Papatoe Local Board identified that 80% of the households in the Otara and Papatoe area were living in, quotation marks, relative poverty and disadvantage, close quote. Alcohol abuse, a predominant problem, causes considerable impact on the local emergency department and the women's refuge. Street prostitution presents a controversial problem in the Papatoe area. The local board also wishes to improve public spaces, control graffiti, and minimise other criminal activity in the area, including youth gang control. Another issue identified by the District Health Board was lack of coordination between services, lack of information sharing between agencies, and a lack of sustained ongoing funding for services. Youth also expressed dissatisfaction with graffiti, tagging, and a dirty town centre. The report also highlighted that young people were lacking guidance and support, as many had parents working long hours and others using alcohol and drugs. The report highlighted a need to create educational opportunities, provide financial literacy, provide victim support, and assist young people with gang affiliations, and provide assistance with alcohol and drug issues, sexual and mental health needs. Subchapter, Gangs and Crime in Otara. A 2008 Manukau District Health Report noted that youth were concerned with the violence and safety at home and in the public, and were concerned with the negative influence of gangs. Gangs thrive in areas with big Maori and Pacific Island populations and high levels of crime, poverty and unemployment. This was a quote to a report from Kathy Marks, The Dark Side of Warrior Culture. Gangs are also responsible for shocking rates of child abuse and domestic violence in New Zealand. Offenders with gang affiliations have a 90% reconviction rate within 60 months of their release from prison. In 2008, at least 500 children were not enrolled in school, training or in work. Boredom and inactivity contributed to gang affiliations and criminal activity. Gangs capitalise on young people with absent fathers and those with drug and alcohol abuse problems, offering escape from a troublesome family life and to provide drug-related careers. Boredom and inactivity is a factor in gang affiliation and criminal activity. There has been an increase in the reported of violent crimes and reported sexual offending, along with an elevated rate of antisocial behaviour and drug misuse. So I'm talking here about Otara. At school, students are reporting increased levels of home-based family violence. In New Zealand, women suffer the highest rate of domestic violence in the developed world and has one of the highest child murder rates. Subchapter: Otara Neighbourhood Policing Unit. The police have a local neighbourhood policing team in Otara who describe their patch as probably the toughest area of policing in New Zealand. Until recently, the neighbourhood had one of the worst crime rates in the country and still has a tough reputation. Several serious criminals still live here and frequently host violent ex-prisoners on parole for murder or armed robbery. Neighbourhood policing requires community support. The police, formerly viewed with hostility and suspicion in Otara, engaged with the local community by extensive door knocking and liaison with local schools, businesses and community groups. The police are battling adult-proved truancy and have identified that around 90% of the repeat offending in the area is committed by young people who are regularly truant from school. In respect of family violence, the police are identifying households at risk and initiating positive contact with victims. Subchapter 3. The need to effectively deal with crime and violence in the home in Otara. It's important for government agencies to deal effectively with local crime issues, domestic violence and poverty, as this can be the breeding ground creating the intergenerational transmission of offending patterns and generations of families trapped in a cycle of hopelessness and despair. Statistical models for predicting violence reveal childhood experience, which include behavioural problems and truancy while at school, juvenile delinquency, childhood hyperactivity, sexual victimization, and sadistic or brutal treatment at the hands of a caregiver lead to subsequent violent behaviour. Violent behaviour in males peaks in late adolescence and early adulthood. Experts predict that the best indicator of future violence behaviour is past acts of violence. Joseph Thompson, the South Auckland serial rapist, was responsible for a reign of terror over South Auckland for 10 years, finally pleading guilty to 129 charges and 61 sexual violation offences. The offending was directly attributed to an unstable home life filled with domestic violence. He was neglected, sexually abused and abandoned by his parents. As a result, Joseph Thompson left school at 15 without qualifications. He joined a gang and he started offending. He appeared numerous times in the district court for various offences over the next decade, without any effective intervention relating to the underlying causes of his offending. Consequently, when he became a father, he repeated the cycle of domestic violence in his own home, repeating the cycle until his family left him. At the age of 25, his offending escalated to committing aggravated robberies for the purpose of committing sexual violation involving the use of serious violence. During this time, he was also engaged in legal proceedings at the family court in a battle over custody of his children. On one occasion, on the way home from meeting with his lawyer, he raped a 14-year-old girl at her home, which was across the road from the lawyer's office. Eventually, after investigation, he confessed to a large number of sexual violation and other charges and was sentenced to 30 years imprisonment with a minimum parole period of 25 years. Subchapter 4. Lessons to be learnt from the British riots. The street riots went on for days in England in August 2011. The violence and the looting shocked the world and raised concerns that the fabric of modern Western society was at risk of breaking down. The British government at the time attributed the criminality behind the rioting to street gangs. However, data analysed from arrest statistics revealed most of the young rioters were not gang members. In reality, the offenders came from the country's most deprived homes. These were individuals who were struggling in schools and poor neighbourhoods, who had been excluded from school, who were caught up in a cycle of deprivation, poor educational attainment, unemployment and criminality. In respect of the adult rioters who appeared in court, more than a third received government benefits to live on. The underlying root cause of the rioting was described by the charity Family Action as being poverty, disadvantage, disaffection. Subchapter C. Overloaded Manukau District Court. There has been a rapid increase in the number of criminal cases coming before the New Zealand courts. Between 2002 and 2007, the number of summary charges increased by 29%, while indictable matters rose 25%. Goodness me. The number of convictions in 2008 was 228,000, which was an increase on 15,000 on the previous year and a rise of 50,000 compared to the decade before. To date, the justice needs of Otara have been dealt with in the Manukau District Court, which is overburdened. The workload at the Manukau District Court has doubled in recent years. The government was proposing at the time I was writing this paper to have a $40.6 million extension of the Manukau Court building, due to start in 2012 for construction and complete in 2014. Now, as at 2017, that's done. So there's so much crime we had to build a gigantic court. The Manukau District Court is situated in the commercial area and it lacks community spirit, in my view. It's a bewildering place for most court users who usually attend with their families. Upon entry, users are met with large electronic screens listing names in courtrooms. And we've introduced a new policy since then that it's like going to the airport and you've got to go through the metal detectors and have your bags x-rayed. People using the courthouse appear disenfranchised by the experience of attending there. The number of criminal cases keeps growing along with the crime in Manukau. There appears to be a revolving door between it, the Manukau District Court, and the Department of Corrections, which is our probation and our prison departments. Offenders go in, they get locked up, they get released, they re-offend and they go back. It's circular. The Manukau District Court, therefore, in my view, is not meeting the identified needs I have referred to for the Otara community. So that was Chapter 3. I'm going to go on and review new tools in the Justice Toolbox that could be used to remedy this problem and propose a solution targeted to meet those identified needs in Otara. Again, I could prepare a similar proposal for any community in New Zealand by analysing all the statistical data relating to that community, their needs, and what's going on with the statistics, and also then applying the justice tools that we have and the available tools overseas that we're not yet using in New Zealand and could use to solve these problems. I hope you found this information helpful. There have been people saying, why is it this way? And recently there's been some proposals floated by a government elected representative from our party that we should have a separate prison for Maori. But the problem is we're not really addressing these underlying needs, and if we use these new tools in the justice system toolbox that we have available from overseas, we could actually target things better rather than having a containment system for Maoris where we kind of lock them up because we don't help them with any of their social problems and we don't resolve the problems in the family. Therefore we create this intergenerational offending, and we're locking up whole generations of Maori people It's not really fair and right and just, and a lot of these effects have revolved out of colonisation that European have directly caused. And although we're sitting here as Europeans saying, well, that was all such a long time ago, it's got ongoing suffering because it's educational, and it goes down through the parents, through each level. And if you're being raised by addicts, people with drug and alcohol problems, teenage parents, often with no other support partners, who are going through gangs, you're just creating this intergenerational cycle of problems. And there are a lot of ways that we could combat it. So the first part of this research paper that I prepared as part of my master's degree a long time ago, which is the community justice model for Otara, involved analysing what is the current justice situation, what is the current way we have of dealing with the situation, and then picking around the statistics, the research and the crime data, and seeing what are the needs. And the story that I told here about Joseph Thompson is that's a pretty extreme example, but we've had a lot of extreme examples come out of South Auckland with the serial rapists, and that all starts in the home. It's how you treat little children. You treat them bad, they're going to grow up and treat their children bad. They're going to go on and treat other people bad. Thompson was so badly abused at home. He was engaged with the justice system for decades, actively involved in it, and we never analysed as part of that justice system his problems to treat any of them. And they got so out of control. 129 offences, 61 sexual violation charges. And one day he's going to get parole. He's got a stand down of 25 years before he can get parole, but he'll be back out. And hopefully you're saying that you want the prison to address all those needs. What I'm simply saying to you is we've created him as a society because we have neglected the proper needs. We haven't got in and addressed some of these problems. There may have been ways we could have stopped that. Well, we could have stopped all the victimisation from resolving, and they were really nasty violations. Home invasions with serious violence. It was really awful, and there was many other people in the same situation. We didn't need to create this mess. There was ways we could deal with it better. So containment of people is important when they're violent, but what we want to do is get in early and resolve these issues before they become out of control, ingrained behaviours that can't be changed. And there's a lot of skills and sources of information now that we have, and we can use the research from overseas. So I'm simply saying that spending billions of dollars on prisons and prison budget hasn't really worked for New Zealand. We have such a high rate of re-offending and recidivism and prison costs. It's not working for us. That we need to look at these other models, because there are other countries who actually spend less on prisons and more on other things and actually don't have such high crime rates. We don't have to go down this path. We need a new model, and we just need to adjust the one we've got a little bit to make it work and to embrace these new tools, which I'm going to go through and explain to you in the next videos. I hope you found this information helpful.